Hi, I'm Matt McGarity. I'm a principal lecturer in the Department of Communication here at the University of Washington. I teach public speaking, argumentation, rhetoric. I designed an Introduction to Public Speaking course, a MOOC. It's run on Coursera and edX, and it's had about 1 million enrollees to date. It's hard to say that there's a single mistake that everybody makes, but I will say that when I work with students and when I work with clients, what I really try to get them to do is do presentations more like they engage in conversation. And I mean that in terms of how they relate to the audience and how they sound. Certainly there are certain times when highly scripted, highly practiced, really polished speeches are called for, but for most of us, the day-to-day presentations or workplace presentations would benefit a lot more if we spoke the way we speak. Probably the biggest challenge I think non-native speakers have is one of prosody. Now, prosody is a term that describes all the things that's going on when you speak besides the words and the syntax. So prosody is stuff like speaker rate and pitch and stress, these sorts of things. And they help us as listeners predict what you're going to say. They help us understand what you're trying to say. And of course, they also change meaning. So in English, of course, there's a big difference between I didn't say that and I didn't say that, right? Those are the exact same words in the exact same order, but very different meanings. Now, prosody is really difficult for non-native speakers. I was a student in Russia, and I never got Russian prosody right. But we know this, and there's been a wealth of research into prosody, and even, in fact, into non-native speakers of English and English prosody. I was reading a study earlier this week, and it was research into international TAs. So here in the U.S., we'll have people come and study at American universities from all over the world. And while they're here getting a master's or a PhD, they might have an opportunity to teach an American class. And so, depending on the university, you'll have a non-native speaker of English in front of a primarily English-speaking audience. So there's one study that looked at this and what some of those challenges were. Well, they found that the international TAs, the non-native speakers of English, had a lot of problems with prosody, and in fact, it made it difficult for some native English speakers to understand them. Specifically, non-native speakers weren't really providing intonational units, so these small chunks, these phrases. This is an intonation unit, but then again, so is this. So they weren't providing those sort of phrases, those phrase breaks. Also, many non-native speakers of English had narrower pitch ranges, so they weren't raising and lowering their pitch as much as is common in English. So that's the problem. What to do about it? Well, it varies. One of the easiest things actually came from that same research study. It says, well, if the problem is pitch modulation in English, one thing you can do is just practice pitch modulation. It's real easy. You can get a pitch program. You can get them on your phones, right? You can get them on your phone, you speak into your phone, it gives you a little nice simple spectrograph, and as you practice, you can try to increase that pitch modulation. Okay, that's one thing to practice. The other thing I think is a little bit more challenging, but more important maybe, and that's don't focus so much on words, focus more on phrases. So when I'll work with non-native speakers, I'll be coaching them, and I'm listening to them, I think, depending on their fluency with English, the focus is much more on the word. They're trying to think, oh, what do I want to say? What's that word in English? And so they're planning out each word in sequence. The result is the prosody cues kind of drop out. So if I'm listening, they end up talking more at the level of the word, and that's hard to listen to. Why? Because I don't hear individual words. I want to hear entire phrases. They speak at the level of word. I want to hear total phrases, that clustering together of like ideas. So my advice to them is I say, hey, put the pauses between phrases, don't put them between words. That's really tough. That just requires getting better at English. But if you have a choice between fluidity, having pauses between phrases instead of words, and getting grammar wrong or words wrong, choose the fluidity. Why? Because as an English speaker, I can hear past a wrong word. I can hear around bad grammar. But it is a lot more difficult for me to follow along if you're not speaking in these phrases, that naturally occurring unit of spoken English. Endings, conclusions. Depends on the genre. Right? How you end a eulogy is probably different than how you end a business presentation. If your business presentations sound like eulogies, it probably doesn't bode well for the business. So it really does depend on genre. Now, if we're talking about business presentations, informative presentations, I would say when we get into that conclusion, I'm thinking about two things. I want to summarize what's just happened, and I want to signal that the conclusion of the speech is about to happen. So in terms of summary, I know probably a lot of people have received advice in writing that says don't repeat yourself. Do repeat yourself in speaking. I can't rehear what you said 5 minutes ago, but you can remind me of it. So I think as you get to the conclusion of that speech, you certainly want to summarize, review, recap what the key themes are, what the takeaways are, what you want me as an audience member to remember. But not only summarize, you should also be signaling, right? You don't want to end the speech and have no one know that you're done. That's humiliating. So you really want to signal to the audience that you're about to stop talking. In English, we can do this, if you think about that last line, we can do this through slowing down that last line and maybe dropping pitch at the end. This sounds more like a final line. Right, so that signals to the audience, again, that's a prosodic marker, it signals to the audience that you're done. You can certainly say thank you at the end of your speech. That's nice, you're kind to your audience. I don't think you should have to say thank you for us to know that you're done. You should provide enough practice so that you know how that last line is going to land. So if something happens and it's unexpected in your speech, I think really the best thing you can do is acknowledge it and adapt. Now that depends on the situation, obviously, and your judgment as a speaker, but I think it's weird if the speaker's standing there and they're locked in and they're continuing on with their speech and there's something going on right next to them. There's a bird, there's a jackhammer, something like that, and they're ignoring it. I don't think that makes you look like a good speaker. You need to acknowledge what's going on around you. But of course, that's difficult because it requires skills in public speaking. It requires that you have topic mastery. But being able to respond to it and stay on message is sort of a hallmark of an excellent speaker. They have such a control of the space of the room and of the topic that they can veer off topic without losing their focus. Now that's tough. That requires being good at public speaking. But if public speaking was easy, everybody would be good at it. And they are not.